not seeking penance for what I've done, Father. I'm asking forgiveness for what I'm about to do.
Welcome to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy. I am jazzed about the return of Charlie Cox's Daredevil in Spider-Man No Way Home and Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin in Hawkeye. But this has me wondering, are these the same Daredevil and Kingpin that I've seen them play before? Well, the answer isn't a simple yes or no. In typical MCU fashion, it's complicated. Let's start with a little bit of history. The Netflix Marvel Universe consisted of Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, the Punisher, and Iron Fist. These shows reference the events of the MCU films. We see newspapers featuring the Battle of New York, and characters reference Iron Man.
I mean, if he had an iron suit or a magic hammer, maybe.
Captain America.
Yeah, I could say I'm Captain America, but it doesn't put wings on my head.
Go after the big green guy, the flag waver. I wasn't even there.
Thor.
Big blonde dude with the hammer.
And Hulk.
Green monster, and I don't mean Fenway.
And Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, is heavily involved in rebuilding the city after the Battle of New York.
I wanted to make this city something better than it is.
Now, up until Hawkeye's finale in Spider-Man No Way Home, these references were only going one way. The shows acknowledged the movies, but the movies never acknowledged the shows. The reason is that Marvel Studios was not involved with the production of these shows. They were produced by Marvel Television. That was a whole other division on a different coast, independent of Marvel Studios, but both were owned by Marvel Entertainment. But come 2019, the Disney overlords placed Kevin Feige in charge of Marvel TV, placing it under the Marvel Studios banner. 2019 also saw the cancellation of all the Netflix shows. And due to contractual obligations with Netflix, that meant fans had to wait 2 years before Marvel Studios could legally touch any of those characters. It was a long 2 years because we didn't know if we were going to see these same actors return as these characters or if we were going to have a reboot that left the Netflix heroes to wither and die on the vine like so much Inhumans. Now, I think I speak for a lot of us fans when I say that I loved most of the Netflix Marvel shows. Daredevil, absolutely brilliant. From the stunning visuals to the impeccable writing, the show is arguably the best Marvel episodic series to date. I mean, that hallway fight. But it's not just the gritty action and phenomenal fight choreography that made the show great. It also gave us a stellar legal drama showing Matt Murdock and friends taking down Wilson Fisk through the legal system. And the Daredevil series also gave us the introduction of Jon Bernthal's perfect take on the Punisher. Daredevil also shared an interconnected world with Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, whose shows were pretty good, especially their first seasons. Now sure, some of these had their problems, looking at you, Iron Fist. But these shows' creators made a dark corner for the MCU for characters who didn't want to be part of the fights and tight spectacle of the movies. Now, as fun as these Netflix shows were, if I can only have 2 characters from this Defenders verse, it would have been Charlie Cox's Daredevil and Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. Kevin Feige knew this about fans, and he delivered. After all this time, we've finally gotten the return of these 2 iconic actors to roles that they made their own. Seeing Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock in No Way Home was one of many crowd-cheering moments in the film, and seeing Vincent D'Onofrio in Hawkeye might have been the best thing we saw in the series. Granted, it might be the last time Kingpin sees anything.
Sometimes family doesn't see eye to eye.
Because in the comics, Maya's shot doesn't kill Kingpin, it blinds him. And there is something poetic about Kingpin being blinded like his archenemy Daredevil. So now that we've gotten confirmation that these actors are back, we're wondering if they're the same versions that we've seen before. Or are these actors playing completely new versions of the characters with a completely different history than what we saw in their shows? So basically I'm asking, are the Netflix shows canon? Now from what we saw of Matt Murdock in No Way Home, he appears to be exactly the same. Kingpin, on the other hand, has some striking differences. He is much stronger. So it's certainly possible that we're looking at a Kingpin who's gotten his hands on some super soldier serum. And that's why he's so freakishly strong compared to his Netflix counterpart, who, keep in mind, wasn't exactly weak. And what's really exciting is that we think the reason Marvel Studios may have enhanced Kingpin is so he can realistically go toe-to-toe with the likes of Spider-Man and the other MCU heroes. Now, of course, with the differences we've noticed in Kingpin also come some similarities. Kingpin's voice, his demeanor, his mannerisms, they're all the same. His wardrobe, such as his cufflinks and bulletproof attire, they're the same too. That being said, Kingpin's look was a bit different. He was sporting a white hat and a red Hawaiian shirt, which of course was ripped directly from the comic Family Business. Vincent D'Onofrio said that he had some involvement in his wardrobe choice, specifically that comic cover was his wallpaper on his computer for years. So, are they the same characters or not? Well, Loki introduced the existence of variants into the MCU.
But sometimes people like you veer off the path the timekeepers created. We call those variants.
Variants, of course, being alternate versions of one being throughout the multiverse. Variants can look and sound just like one another.
What did you expect?
Or they can differ in appearance, sex, race, or even species. For example, J.K. Simmons plays two different versions of J. Jonah Jameson, but Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire all play different versions of Peter Parker. So I think that's the answer, that these are variants of our beloved Netflix characters, meaning they aren't the exact same versions, but they aren't completely different either. You see, when Marvel introduced the multiverse and the concept of variants, they were basically giving themselves a way to cover up any discrepancies between characters that appeared in the Netflix shows who are now in the MCU proper. And MCU proper means anything that Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios oversaw directly. For instance, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., great show, not MCU proper. However, Marvel's Agent Carter was directly made by Marvel Studios, so it is MCU proper, which is why we saw Jarvis appear in Avengers Endgame. We think a lot of the Daredevil series is still canon and does serve as Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk's backstory. But any part of those shows that Kevin Feige doesn't like, or anytime they want to change something that would contradict the previously established history, those things can simply be explained away as not canon to these versions of the characters without it necessarily being a retcon. In short, I don't think the Daredevil series is 100% canon to the MCU. Frankly, it's just too violent and adult-oriented to fit in with the other Disney Plus shows. But Daredevil can certainly still be watched as a close enough history for these characters as we see them continue on as official members of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. For example, let's look at the show Loki. Miss Minutes explains that when someone steps off their predetermined path, it creates a Nexus event. A Nexus event aren't a threat by themselves unless they go on to threaten the sacred timeline. Some Nexus events don't matter at all, like Loki disrupting the city of Pompeii.
Istemons, ignes, pastos per saecola in vos est, Eomiturus!
So it is possible that the Netflix shows are in a different universe where maybe 98.8% of everything that happens also happened in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The timelines could be just that similar. So watching those shows will give you a much deeper connection to these characters moving forward. 10 out of 10 would recommend them. But I'm not just guessing that they're variants. Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio have both confirmed that these characters are a little bit different from their previous iconic roles. See, Charlie Cox, prior to official confirmation that he was returning as Daredevil, said this when he asked what his return would look like.
Be, you know, like a reimagining of the character in the show. So it'd be this, if they choose me to do it, it's gonna be, there's gonna be some elements, of course, which are the same.
Now, we of course now know that Charlie Cox was already well aware of his return and how it was going to be handled.
You lied to me.
Vincent D'Onofrio said this when asked if this is the same Kingpin he's played before.
Tried to connect as many dots to the original canon as they can, you know, and some dots are just not possible to connect. And that's what we've done with connecting to Daredevil and vice versa, is that there's some dots are connected. Like in the Hawkeye show, Fisk is obviously physically stronger and can take more physical abuse.
He also said, I think the blip has happened and I think his kingdom took a bit of a hit and he's trying to get his city back. That's how I played him, and I think that was the general idea. See, I feel like these quotes from Cox and D'Onofrio confirm our theory that they were the same characters we know and love, with a twist. And the in-universe explanation, or in-multiverse explanation,
Okay, I see what you did there.
is that they are variants that share a very similar history.
Marge, I'm confused.
So if you imagine these different timelines, like this is the Netflix timeline and this is the MCU timeline, they're just about the same. Maybe one like the Netflix show went this way, but it kind of joined back in. So they're so similar that they're basically the same, but if Marvel wants to give themselves an out and say reintroduce Karen Page or Bullseye, they can do that. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think these guys are canon to the MCU? Would you like to see more of Daredevil made on Disney+? Tell me in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.